Welcome to Rhodesia, or as we know it today, Zimbabwe. In this video we're taking a fascinating journey through the nation's history, told not through speeches or boring textbooks, but through its television screens. We'll trace how TV began as a tool of propaganda, created to glorify the white minority rule and silence the black majority. We'll see how after independence, TV became a stage for new voices and local stories. From Robert Mugabe's tight grip on the airwaves to the rise of homegrown dramas and shows, we'll watch what ordinary Zimbabweans watched and see how TV reflected and sometimes resisted the country's shifting power. This is a crazy and fascinating story, and it's never been told before, so let's tell it now. This is the story of how television became a mirror for a nation finding its voice. Bold, creative, and unapologetically Zimbabwean. This is television in Zimbabwe. So first, a brief history on this fascinating country. So Rhodesia, today's Zimbabwe, first began as a British colony in the 1890s, founded by Cecil Rhodes' British South Africa Company. White settlers established farms, towns and a government that ruled over a large African majority who had few rights. For many white Rhodesians, like you're seeing in this film, life was comfortable. European-style schools, golf clubs and imported British television. But for most black Africans, life meant poverty, forced labour, and living in crowded rural reserves. Laws like the Land Appointment Act divided the best farmland for whites and left black farmers with the rest. In 1965, Prime Minister Ian Smith declared a unilateral declaration of independence from Britain, which was determined to maintain his white rule of the country. The world condemned it, sanctions followed and guerrilla war broke out. African nationalist armies, ZANU and ZAPU, fought from bases in Mozambique and Zambia. During this time, TV was tightly censored, used to present Rhodesia as calm and prosperous, even while the Bush War raged in the countryside. By the late 1970s, the war and sanctions had drained the economy. In 1979, negotiations at Lancaster House ended white minority rule. And in 1980, the new nation of Zimbabwe was born, with Robert Mugabe as its first Prime Minister. During this time, the state-run Zimbabwe Broadcasting Corporation became the government's loudspeaker, celebrating Mugabe's achievements and silencing criticism. By the 2000s, corruption, land seizures and economic collapse brought hyperinflation and hardship. Mugabe's control of the media and security forces kept him in power until 2017, when a military intervention forced him to resign. Today, Zimbabwe remains proud of its liberation history, yet struggles with poverty, censorship and the legacy of long authoritarian rule continues. A nation whose story has been shaped by who controls the land and who controls the message. So, if you're ready, join me now as we travel back in time and tune in first to TV in Rhodesia. So, TV arrived in Rhodesia in 1960 with the launch of Rhodesia Television RTV, and the programming was focused entirely on the minority white audience and was broadcast in English. Early local programming was factual in nature and included shows like this one, Rhodesian Spotlight.
Salisbury is undergoing what its mayor described as quite fantastic growth. But the growth of the Federation's capital is a reality. Its traffic is increasing, its population is increasing, and building operations are spreading residential and industrial suburbs far beyond the old boundaries.
This is just bizarre, isn't it? Watching this footage, you wouldn't believe that this is a nation in Africa. There's no African faces, no African languages, just an incredibly British commentator broadcasting to the minority white population.
A new skyline. It is for all the world as if human enterprise and human endeavor have taken a new lease on life, and Salisbury is moving headlong into a new future. For mirrored here
So, hundreds and hundreds of episodes of Rhodesian Spotlight were created, and they were all designed to showcase Rhodesia to the world.
Arrive at Livingston, and it isn't long before they're on their way to see the spectacle that held David Livingstone spellbound. Small wonder that Livingstone, inspired by the majesty of the Victoria Falls, named them after his queen.
Rhodesian Spotlight was created by the government's Information Services Department and was designed to showcase positive stories about life in the country, industry, agriculture, new infrastructure and events among the white settler community. As you can tell, episodes typically featured that upbeat British narration, patriotic music and short film segments portraying Rhodesia as orderly, prosperous and modern. Although presented as a neutral news programme, of course Rhodesian Spotlight was just a propaganda tool of the Rhodesian Information Office, and it was aimed to promote national pride among the white citizens and to counter international criticism of white rule.
Sir Godfrey Huggins took a launch trip up the Zambezi, and this was closely...
Now, this show ran for nearly 30 years, and there are hundreds and hundreds of episodes out there, and each one is an incredible historical insight into this country. Again, just a reminder, this is African television.
Demonstrations of the latest methods of weed control.
Let's finally take a look at a later episode from the 1970s. Although I'm told this episode was from the 1970s, but the graphics and music look more like it's from the 60s. I don't know, maybe TV just hadn't caught up yet in Rhodesia.
To do in my spare time. Well, plenty it seems, because over 15,000 people visited a hobbies exhibition in Salisbury in 1 week. Eve is a doll 55 years old, but she shows up well beside this cool chick. It was certainly a dog's life for Mrs. Chummy Pitch, who organised the whole show.
Mrs. Chummy Pitch. They just don't make names like they used to. Now, Spotlight Rhodesia rarely featured any black faces, and of course, it avoided mentioning of the escalating liberation war or racial inequality. Every single episode portrays Rhodesia as peaceful, self-reliant, and unfairly isolated from the rest of the world. And, of course, white. You wouldn't know it at the time from watching these propaganda films, but Rhodesia during this period was 95% black. After independence in 1980, Rhodesian Spotlight was discontinued and pretty much thrown in the bin for just being racist propaganda. But it remains a revealing historical artifact, showing how the media was used under white minority rule to shape public perception, maintain morale, and suppress awareness of the liberation struggle taking place beyond the camera's frame.
One of the most
Another example of early programming in Rhodesia is this one. This is Rhodesian Roundup, and yes, it is in colour.
The Central African Trade Fair, held every year in Bulawayo. Not just an important industrial exhibition, but the occasion of some ceremony. A little goat goes a long way in the army.
So as you can see, like Rhodesian Spotlight, Rhodesian Roundup was a TV and film newsreel programme produced by the Ministry of Information during the late 1960s and 70s. This particular episode is from 1966, and it served as a weekly current affairs and news digest, again presenting a curated selection of domestic stories aimed at reinforcing the image of Rhodesia as a stable, self-reliant and thriving state despite international isolation.
And here are some of our own homegrown models displaying new fashions created in this country. A familiar and popular figure, the Prime Minister. With him is the chairman.
There are very few examples of programming on Rhodesian TV that weren't just outright political propaganda, but here's one of them. This is Meet the Minister, and this was a political show aimed to interview those in power, of course within the confines of what the state would allow. someone cue the man.
Good evening and welcome to the last in our series of Meet the Minister. Tonight we're fortunate to have the Prime Minister, the Honourable Ian Douglas Smith.
We realise that nothing could be more stupid than to live in a country with a large section of our community who are Africans and not create conditions which mean that we live together in harmony and in peace. So this is our continual policy, and it always has been. And if I may say so, I think it has paid dividends, because we do the best we possibly can for our African population. We go out of our way to try to play the game, to accommodate them. I think they appreciate this, and in return I think they have acted like good Rhodesians, the same as we have. There's no division between black and white in Rhodesia. We are all Rhodesians, and this is the crux of our policy.
Yes, he actually just said that. There is no division between black and white in Rhodesia. Programmes like you're watching now were broadcast at a time of growing international condemnation and amongst internal wars for independence. During the 60s and 70s, apart from the few examples of locally produced TV you're watching now, Rhodesian television relied heavily on Western imports. And I'm told that Doctor Who, I Love Lucy, The Avengers and 40 Towers were particularly popular. However, in Rhodesia's dying days before it gained independence, there were a few attempts at producing local content which wasn't just news or current affairs.
I believe this is the sort of thing.
This programme is called Operation Noah, and it's probably the most well-known of them all. It chronicles the extraordinary real-life animal rescue operations that took place between 1958 and 1964 during the creation of Lake Kariba, one of the largest man-made lakes in the world. Led by conservationist Robert Mugabe and his team, the operation used boats, nets and tranquilizers to rescue thousands of stranded animals. Elephants, antelopes, lions, crocodiles and snakes from rising floodwaters and relocate them safely in what became known as Matsudona National Park.
When the waters of man-made Lake Kariba threatened the wildlife contained in an area of 11,000 square kilometers, animals had to be forcibly rescued by the thousands. So for a time, he was left to his own devices, while the rescue team got on with the job of capturing the calves on a nearby island who would otherwise drown.
So Operation Noah was probably the only Rhodesian TV programme that attracted international attention, and versions of it were actually shown on the BBC and other English-speaking networks. Now, the show pretty much left politics behind and instead focused on human compassion for wildlife, helping to promote an image of Rhodesia as a modern, responsible nation with advanced conservation ethics. The phrase Operation Noah has become part of Zimbabwe's environmental history, symbolising both a conservation milestone in a complex colonial world. And I'm pleased to tell you that while they look like they're being a little bit rough with these baby elephants, it was all to save them and they all survived. As we enter the 1980s, Rhodesia vanishes from the map and the country declares independence, becoming known as Zimbabwe. The former Prime Minister Ian Smith becomes leader of the opposition and is replaced by Robert Mugabe. During the 1980s, TV changes massively, and for the first time, black presenters and actors take centre stage. Here's a news broadcast from Zimbabwe in 1984. I think this is the first news theme tune I've heard with drums, and I'm completely here for it.
Good evening. In the bulletin tonight, the Deputy Prime Minister calls on PTA member states to mobilise their resources to ensure the speedy establishment of a trade and development bank.
Now, it would be wrong to assume that with Zimbabwe now being an independent country, the news and the media became more independent as well, because, well, that didn't happen. ZBC, the Zimbabwean Broadcasting Company, was the only television station allowed, and no independent TV shows were allowed to broadcast. Importantly, ZBC had to promote unity, Mugabe's rule and ZANU-PF's liberation narrative.
He officially opened the first extraordinary meeting of Ministers of Trade, Finance and Planning in the PTA region.
After independence in 1980, Zimbabwean TV began to tell new kinds of stories, and none captured the spirit of the time quite like this show. This is the Mukadota Family. Created by comedian and musician Mukadota, the show followed him as a proud, funny and often scheming father living with his wife in a Harare township. Each episode mixes comedy, music and moral lessons, showing the struggles and joys of ordinary Zimbabweans trying to adjust to modern life, from money problems to romance to gossip and pride. The show was funny but also deeply real, and have a look at some of the acting I'll show you in a minute. It's actually really good. And for the first time in this country's history, black urban life, spoken in the local dialect Shona, full of local humour and slang, took centre stage on national TV. This show is interesting to me because this is not your typical sitcom. Think of the kind of sitcoms you used to see in the 1980s. Well, they didn't really look like this. This actually has really heartfelt, genuine stories in it and really good actors portraying real life. I can't overemphasize just how big this show was. Mukadota became a household name, and this is more than just a TV show. It is a symbol of Zimbabwean wit and resilience. Oh, and music, of course. Try and stop him singing. Honestly, he bursts into song every 30 seconds. To be fair though, this is actually quite a nice track, and while I was editing this, I did start humming along to it. And talking of music, the 1980s also saw the introduction of music shows on Zimbabwean TV. In the 80s and 90s, the most popular music show in Zimbabwe was this one. This is Ezomgido, which translates to Things of Dance. And every week, Ezomgido would bring music, movement and energy into living rooms across the country. Local bands played live, dance groups competed, and young performers showed off their latest dancing styles. From traditional drumming to modern guitars and pop beats, it was an absolute celebration of Zimbabwean life. More than just entertainment, Ezomgido captured the excitement of a young nation finding its rhythm. Proud, creative, and unafraid to dance. I mean, look at this programming. We have come a long way since Spotlight Rhodesia. As we move into the 1990s and early noughties, censorship increased further under Robert Mugabe. ZBC remained the only TV channel permitted, and it was strongly government-aligned. Any independent channels were repeatedly and sometimes brutally shut down. Sometimes the propaganda was subtle and sometimes it wasn't. Take a look at this. This is a music video and song broadcast on ZBC, all about, you guessed it, how brilliant Robert Mugabe is.
Makaisa life in you but danger kuti tifare kana vamugabe vari panyanga ati panike vamugabe vari panyanga ati rasike ushungo ramba muchilida makatisiya tiri tega tinorasika.
Okay, so that's quite enough of that. Now here's another massive show from the 1990s. This is Gringo, and this is probably one of the most famous Zimbabwean sitcoms of all time. So, Gringo is a quick-talking, mischievous handyman who finds trouble wherever he goes. Gringo is lazy, clever, but also endlessly funny, forever dodging work, chasing dreams, and outsmarting his boss. The show turns everyday township life into comedy gold, but beneath the laughter, it also tells real stories of survival, hustle, and the humour that keeps people going even when times are tough. So in this episode, Gringo's scene here has a crush on the girl in the episode, and so he decides to go and get a load of newspaper, shove it in her date's briefcase to try and embarrass him, I think.
I'm leaving, I think.
Okay.
What's this? What's that, Toby? What's all this rubbish about? Hey, you, come back and get your rubbish.
So I think you kind of get the idea. Gringo is kind of mischievous, plays pranks on people, and basically just gets into trouble.
Anna, come on.
Look, I watched an episode of Gringo and personally I thought it was pretty rubbish, but I understand this show is a massive hit in Zimbabwe, mostly because it showcases Zimbabwean wit and resilience, and the show is proof that laughter can make light of life struggles. Decades later, people in Zimbabwe still quote Gringo today. As we move into the noughties, Zimbabwe entered a political and economic crisis, and this was reflected in much of its programming. This is Tirupar Wendo, and this is a Zimbabwean TV epic drama series that aired on ZBC TV from 2005 all the way up until 2017. Set in pre-colonial Zimbabwe, it follows the life of Dapi Mushagadi, portrayed by Felix Matassa, as he navigates the complexities of tribal conflicts, leadership and personal growth. Now, the series delves into themes of loyalty, betrayal and the quest for justice, offering viewers a glimpse into the rich tapestry of Zimbabwe's past, but on an absolute shoestring budget. So I don't think he's going to win an Oscar anytime soon. Now, this show was produced at a time of a massive economic crisis in the country when there was a lot less money going into TV. Wow, can't wait for next week's episode. Now, one show I did really like that Zimbabwe broadcast in the noughties was this one. This is Studio 263.
There's no other place me I would try to be. But I know that you know your life.
So, Studio 263 started broadcasting in 2002, and it is a soap opera that captured the lives, loves and struggles of Zimbabwean youth. Set in and around a bustling TV station, Studio 263, the show followed friends and families as they faced romance, betrayal, unemployment and the pressures of modern life.
I'll talk to you later.
That's our contestant number 1. She's 20 years old. And she's doing a top flight secretarial course at a local college. Beautiful. Thank you very much.
Contestant number 2, Chido, 19. Chido loves music.
So as you can tell in this episode, they're holding a beauty contest. And of course, they've got the obligatory question and answer section.
Beverly, how are you tonight?
Fine.
And how are you finding the competition?
Simple.
Good to hear. Your question, Beverly. What do you think should be done to control the spread of HIV and AIDS in Zimbabwe?
The people must let members of the parliament give permission to the judges to convict anyone who spreads the disease purposefully. Thank you very much.
And world peace. Now, Studio 263 was massively popular, particularly with young viewers, and in many ways it became more than a show, because it launched the careers of the young cast, inspired conversations around the nations, and it proved that Zimbabwe could tell its own stories for its own audience, even on a tiny budget while the country coped with economic problems. Studio 263 wasn't just entertainment, it was a mirror of urban Zimbabwean life at the start of the 2000s.
I believe I would improve on the transport system.
And what exactly do you mean by that?
I think we need more combis. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I like her, she's got my vote. So as you can tell, this show is actually really watchable and just generally quite entertaining. Now, by the 2000s, the Zimbabwean economy had collapsed. Hyperinflation, food shortages and unemployment plunged millions into hardship. International criticism mounted, and Mugabe's longtime allies grew uneasy. In November 2017, after weeks of military intervention and mass public demonstrations, Mugabe resigned the presidency. His fall marked the end of an era. A nation's long experiment with revolutionary leadership gave way to cautious hope for reform. Since the fall of Mugabe, there has been a slight opening up of space within TV, with more private and digital TV channels appearing, of course alongside YouTube and other streaming platforms. And anybody watching this video from Zimbabwe, please say hello in the comments. However, ZBC, the main state channel, is still politicised. And so we're going to end this video with one of the most popular shows from the past few years in Zimbabwe. This is DreamStar, aka Zimbabwe's Got Talent. So pretty much like the rest of the globe, the 2010s have seen the absolute explosion of reality and talent shows, and DreamStar is the biggest one in Zimbabwe. Yeah, it's a no from me. DreamStar Zimbabwe began in 2014 and has been one of the country's most exciting talent competitions. Open to performers aged 12 to 40, it celebrates music, dance, comedy and poetry, bringing together talent from all 10 provinces in Zimbabwe. It's the usual format. Contestants go through auditions, semi-finals and a grand final, where winners not only gain national recognition, but also sometimes travel abroad to showcase Zimbabwean artistry, including some performing in China. So this is the grand final of the 2018 show, and if you were wondering, it was won by this guy, Minister Desire. Zimbabwe is slowly moving to a multimedia landscape after years of being dominated by just one broadcaster. A good example of it is this show. This is Soulmate, and this airs on the private channel ZTN Prime. The story centres on Fuzma, a charming yet troubled young man from the ghetto who becomes entangled with Lucretia, a wealthy and sheltered woman. Yes, it's that usual trope.
I'm so tired of always being a second option.
You are one crazy couple.
As you can tell, the show is slickly produced and has high production values, and is one of the first examples of a private, independent network in Zimbabwe producing its own content. One thing is clear. We have come a long, long way since Rhodesian Spotlight. So then, I hope you enjoyed this journey through the history of Zimbabwean TV. One of the reasons why I love creating this series is that TV often reflects the society it serves, and nowhere is this more evident than in Rhodesia and modern-day Zimbabwe. From the era of white-only broadcasting that centred only on propaganda and white stories, to the years of censorship under Robert Mugabe, and finally to the emergence of vibrant, diverse programming, Zimbabwe's TV landscape has mirrored the nation's complex evolution. As a British person, making this video was particularly eye-opening. I'll admit, I didn't know much about Zimbabwe's history or Britain's role in it before starting this project. At times, the ignorance made me feel uneasy, even guilty, hearing that clipped British accent narrating about how brilliant Rhodesia was, while completely ignoring the 95% black population. But through researching and creating this piece, it's really helped me to gain a deeper appreciation and understanding of the history of this fascinating country. And maybe it's helped you to see it in a new light too, and perhaps you may have even found your new favourite show. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe and share it with your friends. You can also become a channel member to help support the channel. We'll see you next time.